We are joined now by Miranda Devine of the New York Post. I wanted to bring Miranda on the show, given the revelations that have come out of Facebook and the continued endorsement of all of the good work that she has done as the New York Post reporter who broke the news about everything surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. Miranda, I think I've said for you for years now coming on this show that I think the New York Times and the Washington Post should have to return all their Russia collusion hoax stories and for the Pulitzers that they got and give them all to you. Mark Zuckerberg's letter didn't contain any new revelations for you, but it's just further endorsement that you were right about everything. Are you surprised still at the lack of coverage that even Mark Zuckerberg writing a letter saying, hey, we were told to censor by the Biden administration, and I think even more significantly, the FBI told us that a fake story was coming? Are you like New York Times and Washington Post just didn't cover it? MSNBC, CNN, their audiences legitimately still think the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation.
It's incredible, isn't it? But look, I'm not really surprised that they're not covering it, because if they did, they would have to admit that everything that they've been doing over the last 4 years was a big lie and a hoax, and that they tricked their readers, in order to get Joe Biden across the line. And so, look, and even Zuckerberg, I mean, it's too little too late, isn't it? It's interesting that he's doing it, that he's fessed up the way he has in quite fulsome ways, talking about how the FBI came and lied to them about the Hunter Biden laptop and that he knows it's not Russian disinformation. But I think he's just doing that to get out ahead of the Donald Trump train. He thinks that Trump will become president. And in fact, I just read a little excerpt from a new book that Trump's brought out, and there's a photo of him with Zuckerberg when he was president in the Oval Office, and he writes a little note on it that he'll be keeping a close eye on Zuckerberg, and if he breaks the law again, that he'll end up spending a lot of time in prison. So that's what Zuckerberg's afraid of, as well as the arrest of the founder of Telegram in France. I think all big tech owners are going to be feeling the heat at the moment.
Is it, by the way, I haven't talked a lot about the Telegram owner's arrest in France, but the standard that's being applied to him, to the extent that I can tell, of you are responsible for how people use your product, is really kind of a staggering example. In other words, people use cell phones all the time to engage in criminal activity. The CEO of AT&T doesn't get arrested, right, for having allowed the cell phone network to engage in criminal activity. And to my knowledge, for instance, no one at Apple has ever been arrested. You tell me if I'm wrong, if you know this to be untrue, but no one at Apple, it's really hard oftentimes to crack a Apple phone, right, to be able to get inside if you have your code. Apple doesn't give that information generally to investigative agencies, by and large. To my knowledge, no one at Apple has ever been charged with a crime for that, right? The Telegram precedent, I think, is kind of staggering. Have you been paying attention to that story? Because it's pretty wild what they're trying to do to that founder.
You're spot on, and it really is just a selective intimidation of this guy, because authorities, this is a global thing. The United States, I remember years ago when I was still working in Australia, came to the Australian government to get the Australian government to coerce their own tech people, big tech, to allow backdoors into their encrypted apps as part of the Five Eyes program, so that then the United States could utilize that backdoor via Australia. So this has been a wet dream for the intelligence agencies around the world for a long time, and they've managed to get, I mean, Apple actually, so many times during my research on the Hunter Biden laptop, we found that there were people like Rudy Giuliani who were being spied on by the FBI, and Apple had allowed these covert surveillance warrants, just handed over all the information, allowed the FBI to go and spy on the iCloud of Rudy Giuliani and others, and it's only many years afterwards that Apple then sends a letter to the victim, the subject, the surveillance person, and says, oh, by the way, we allowed the FBI to hack into your private data. So I think Telegram is unusual. WhatsApp, everyone used to think was safe, but it's not, because it was bought by Facebook, by Mark Zuckerberg, and he, of course, bent over to the authorities and allowed them to look at everything. So there's really very little left on the web that's private and where you can safeguard your privacy. Telegram was one of the last, and of course that made Pavel Turov, the Russian-born owner who was living in Dubai, because the Russians were trying to force him to cough up the information, and now it's the French that have done it. And, there is some evidence out there that the State Department and Antony Blinken were a part of that attempt to lock this guy up for many, many years.
Okay. Are you troubled as I am? And you and I have had a long discussion about this. We did a long-form discussion about this a while back. The FBI seized the Hunter Biden laptop in December of 2019. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this data. In the summer of 2020, they started to pre-bunk the idea that there may be a laptop story coming and that it would be Russian disinformation and that it had to be tamped down by Facebook, Twitter, everywhere else. A lot of people want to focus on Mark Zuckerberg, and they want to focus on Jack Dorsey back in the day, the guys who ran Facebook and Twitter, among other social media sites. But the argument I've been making is, if the FBI came to me and said, hey, there's a Russian disinformation campaign coming, and then the New York Post story came out, it's not crazy that their first thought would be, oh my goodness, the FBI was right. I'm far more troubled by who ordered the code red inside of our government. And I'm also equally troubled that a huge number of journalists, the vast, vast majority of them, don't seem to care at all to unravel that mystery. Do you have a sense for who would have been ordering the code red inside of the government? And isn't that arguably the biggest American political story of the 21st century?
Bingo, absolutely. And it all is it's the same people that decided that they were going to sabotage Donald Trump even before he got into office, the Russia hoax, the Ukraine impeachment, and finally they were determined, these cabal of people inside the CIA. I mean, this goes right to the top of the CIA. Remember that letter written by 51 former intelligence officials lying that our stories and the laptop were Russian disinformation. We now know that that was engineered by now Secretary of State, then a campaign official for Joe Biden, Antony Blinken. He instigated that letter to be written by these CIA directors. There were 5 former acting or serving CIA directors who signed that letter and who organized it and who coerced the other CIA people to sign it. Those people, and that letter was signed off by the head of the CIA at the time, Gina Haspel. So this is a push inside the CIA itself with help from other intel agencies like the FBI, people in the DOJ, fellow travelers, who all believed that and still believe that Donald Trump is an existential threat to, quote, democracy. All he is a threat to their unfettered agenda. And they have been doing things in the American people's name that we don't know about. And if we did, we would say no. And that includes things like regime change in Russia, endless wars, and trying to, start World War III. They are very dangerous people, and Donald Trump is a threat to them.
Miranda, you've got a new book coming out. I actually can't wait to read it. I didn't know this was happening. What can you tell us about the new book and what the focus is?
Well, thank you. It's called The Big Guy. It's out next month, September 24, and it's basically the story of the cover-up of the laptop. We didn't know half of it when we were first censored by big tech in October of 2020. The information that has come out since and that I have discovered from whistleblowers, named and unnamed, is just mind-blowing. And it shows you that Hunter Biden was being protected by the CIA and by other sort of shadowy forces within the United States government. And Joe Biden had a relationship with them and was their puppet for decades. And they gave the Biden family a green light to be corrupt and to influence peddle around the world when Joe Biden was vice president.
Miranda Devine, New York Post. Yesterday I was talking about, this is kind of a broad media question for you. I love our industry, even though I think that it's oftentimes a complete and total joke, which is a bit bittersweet, I would say. But I was talking about the New York Times and the Washington Post and their refusal to cover what I think is the biggest political story of the 21st century. That is members of our government rigging the election by saying that something that was they knew to be true, that is and accurate, the Hunter Biden laptop, that it was actually Russian disinformation. And I made the point, I'm glad the New York Post exists, but you guys are still an advertiser-driven business. It isn't so much of a subscription business. Don't you think, if you could wave a magic wand, that there is a huge need for a Washington Post or New York Times that is just a little bit to the right? They're far left-wing. I know the Wall Street Journal, but it's more of a business-focused publication. I love it. I like the New York Post. There is no direct equivalent of the New York Times or the Washington Post in the modern U.S. media industry. You can say Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. That's the cable market. Am I crazy to think that there is no just a little bit right-leaning version of the New York Times and the Washington Post? And I think that matters because those newspapers are now just Democrat propaganda machines, and they're used to launder the truth, and there isn't someone punching back against them as often as should be the case. Am I crazy?
No, look, you're so right, and I think it would fix a lot of problems in this country if there were a sort of an establishment newspaper. It doesn't have to be left or right. I don't care if they have Democrat-leaning editorials, as long as they tell the truth. All they have to do is be honest and not slant everything, and also go out looking for dirt against, for instance, the New York Times today has gone out and looked for somebody to say something nasty about Donald Trump at Arlington Cemetery. They looked up the name of a family whose son is buried in the same cemetery, and this person said something very anodyne, but it gets twisted out of context and turned into a slur against Donald Trump. And then Democrat readers believe it, and then they write to me and tell me I'm an idiot because I don't know the truth. The New York Times and these newspapers are propagandizing their readers, and their readers have their polls showing that Democrats have enormous trust, like 75% trust,
yes,
in their favorite media organs like the New York Times and Washington Post. And Republicans don't, because we are forced to see both sides. And so we know that most of the media is full of lies and propaganda, and we filter accordingly. Whereas Democrats are so naive that they believe everything that they're told. And what's more, they don't care. Even if you showed them proof that this was a lie, like Russia hoax, they don't care. They don't want to know. They just want to stick in their bubble of delusion.
She is Miranda Devine, my number one overall draft pick for the most honest reporter in the 21st century so far. I can't wait to read the book. Make sure that you come back on and get us early copies so we can be ready to talk about it here on the show.
Love to. Thanks so much, guys.
That's Miranda Devine. Go follow her. Go read her at the New York Post. She nailed everything on the Hunter Biden laptop, and every day she becomes more and more correct. And even people who are haters, I'm going to play a clip for you from my good buddy Joe Scarborough here in a little bit, where he says the Hunter Biden laptop's completely fake. In fact, I'll play it for you when we come back. Look, my guy Seaton, he runs chalk. Some of you may have seen me rip out 10 reps of 185 pounds. That is double 45s, double 25s, 45-pound bar. I didn't realize that I was such a beast. I didn't realize how strong I was till so many people said, you can't do that, Clay. And so I said, yeah, I can. Like, I'm a 45-year-old dad of 3. I'm not in particularly elite shape, let's be honest, especially people seeing me on video right now can attest to that. But I did it. I think it's because I still try to work out. And also, I still have a decent amount of testosterone, unlike pretty much everybody in the Biden administration. You know who doesn't have testosterone at all? Anybody, frankly, that's voting for Kamala Harris in mail. Maybe you got a friend in your family who's low T and voting for Kamala Harris. How about checking out Chalk, CHOQ.com. You can get 20% increase in your testosterone over the next 3 months. It's all natural. It's a great supplement. Also, maybe you got questions. Maybe you just want to ask, hey, what's going on here? You can call their US-based customer service team, 50-CHALK-3000. Put some vim, vigor, vitality back in your life. Don't be a Kamala voting dude. Actually have some testosterone. Chalk.com, lowest subscription rate for life when you use my name, 50-CHALK-3000. Tell them Clay sent you.